Watch this.
A fixed income can lead to some unsteady finances when inflation is anything but fixed. But for those whose income relies heavily on Social Security, there's some heavy lifting relief coming. Absentee ballots rely on your signature as verification. But what if you're a bit careless with your John Hancock? A scribble more than a signature. Or it just doesn't match. We have those answers to your questions coming up.
In a given case, especially if I were a district court trial judge, you think about, is this going to allow the defendant a fair trial?
A high-profile murder case getting a lot of attention from all over has led to the decision to keep cameras out of the courtroom. A former judge explains what goes into such a ruling. The largest retirement plan in the country is about to make the biggest jump in 4 decades. I'm talking about Social Security benefits, and beginning in January, those payments will increase by 8.7%, or an average of $140 a month. It's part of a Social Security annual cost of living adjustment, an adjustment that's meant to make sure recipients don't fall behind inflation. And with the highest inflation rate in 40 years, well, it stands to reason the 2023 COLA would be the highest since 1981. AARP Idaho says more than 370,000 Idahoans draw some form of a Social Security benefit. And this increase is one of the few breaks senior citizens who rely heavily on those funds are getting this economy. Here's Andrew Bartline.
The Social Security Administration Office. They're slated to pay out big.
You can never complain about getting a few extra bucks, right?
Patrick Sheridan knows.
I'm just getting ready to set that up and start next year.
At the same time, Social Security benefits increased by 8.7%. Patrick will be one of more than 370,000 Idahoans reaping the benefits of a bigger payout.
Yeah, it's kind of unheard of. So I'll take 8-9% in a year. That's great.
But Pat sees it as a Band-Aid. He retired in 2016 and knows the pain of inflation and the force of a fickle financial state.
Some of our investments dropping, close to $300,000 in less than a 4-month, 6-month span. I don't think you ever anticipate that.
The uncertainty of Pat's private investments paying off isn't fixed by a larger Social Security sum.
Crushing people's 401ks and investments, and so it's not a pretty picture out there right now.
The picture condenses down to one number, an 8.2% inflation rate over the past 12 months.
It's important that we get inflation under control.
Idaho economics professor Stephen Peterson says the inflation rate is a massive concern. While it's a good thing Social Security adjusts their payments to keep up with inflation, the long-term viability of the program is in question, early as 2035.
Social Security taxes at that time will only cover 3/4 of the benefits being paid out. And so there's the long-term issue of how we are going to pay for these increased benefits.
Benefits that AARP estimates will total $6.1 billion in payouts to Idahoans alone. They say it will stimulate the local economy.
New money to Idaho is always a good thing. So in that respect, they're correct.
Peterson doesn't expect the Social Security program to collapse anytime soon.
It's the worst that could happen is you might see a modest reduction in the stipend in real terms. In your stipend in real terms.
But he does say the economy is showing mixed signals, signaling to him a possible recession. And while a couple extra bucks is a benefit to future Social Security payouts, it doesn't serve a solution to the high inflation.
Not that problem, no.
Retired for 6 years, drawing a monthly payout, but still stuck, waiting to see if his hard work, his investments, will pay off too.
And just the uncertainty of things right now, it's causing us to draw back just a little bit and rethink things.
Professor Peterson says the COLA rate is largely based off CPIW, which is one of the Bureau of Labor Statistics measures for inflation. He says that figure historically skews high, so these COLA rates are probably dealing out more than is absolutely necessary to keep up with inflation. Now, Brian, Professor Peterson doesn't seem terribly concerned about that, but it is kind of an interesting thing to think about. And of course, there are concerns about Social Security, its longevity down the road. He thinks it's going to be fine. You either cut spending, you raise taxes, you kind of got to do one of them, which is hard because they're both pretty unpopular.
Well, this concern about Social Security, that's been going on for decades. I mean, from the 80s on, they've been talking about how long is it going to last. So I guess, as you said, you either got to cut the taxes or increase the taxes, or cut the spending to kind of make up for it. But it seems by 2035, it shouldn't be a problem or won't be a problem?
By 2035, he says what is paid into it is going to be about 3/4 of what's paid out of it. So at that point, he thinks it's going to be a little bit rocky.
It's a little off balance then.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. Well, we talked a little bit about absentee voting this week, with several of you already requesting one or having already sent one in. One would think there'd be an uptick in how many absentee ballots are requested in Idaho with the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and how it impacted in-person voting and all. But we did find out this week the state is seeing about the same number of requests, the rate of requests, as we've seen in previous election years. But we've also seen several questions concerning absentee ballots, like these from Phil in Boise. I've wondered for a while, if I were to have a ballot rejected because of signature mismatch, would I hear back, or does it just get rejected and I'm not told? Also, is there a way to know what my official signature looks like? The one on my license was on a digital pad, and I think it is basically, well, illegible and not much like my real one. Thanks, says Phil. Well, yeah, it would be nice to know if your vote was discounted because of a discrepancy. Joe Paris checked in with the Secretary of State's office to get the answers.
Thousands of Idahoans are expected to vote through the mail via absentee voting for the November 2022 election. That process comes with practical questions about voter security and authentication. But as Phil asked the 208, if an absentee ballot is rejected for a bad signature, is the voter ever told? We checked in with Idaho election expert, Chief Deputy Secretary of State Chad Houck.
So under Idaho law, what you're typically talking about there, or what's described in the public, is curing that ballot. That's the term most often associated with what we're talking about here. And there is no requirement in Idaho law for county clerks to cure a ballot.
However, Houck says county clerks want to get the votes correct and counted.
They do everything they can in most cases to reach out to that individual and let them know. They may have contact information that it may be that the only contact information they have is mail. So they would be mailing them a letter saying there's been an issue with your signature. The fastest way to find out about that is to jump onto voteidaho.gov, check the status of your existing ballot. You'll see that it went from outstanding to rejected or outstanding to on hold. That lets you know that you need to get in touch with the clerk.
County clerks may have a phone number on file for you as well, so they may call you about the issue. The election season, though, some Idahoans might be voting absentee for the first time, prompting a question about what their signature is supposed to look like on the ballot, in terms of what the county has on record and how voters can make sure it matches up. Houck says the signature depends on how you registered to vote.
If you registered online with our online voter registration tools, then your signature was actually pulled from your DMV file, as long as there was a usable signature there with the DMV. So it would be the same as what's on your driver's license. If you filled out a voter registration card, then that signature is going to be what was on that actual registration card scanned in as a digital image.
Speaking of authentication, a popular question about the process involves who is doing the work. A computer, a person, something in between. Well, Houck says in Idaho, it's human beings.
We do put all of our county staff folks through a handwriting signature verification training program. They're taught to look for specific markers, specific indicators that give them a high level of confidence that the signature, while it may mature or degrade over time, was actually executed by the same individual as the record signature.
Some counties, like Ada County, do use digital scanning just to make sure there's actually a signature on the ballot before authentication. Houck says this is a great reminder. You need to have a signature on your absentee ballot for it to count.
I think the biggest thing to remember when we're talking about absentee isn't about the number of signatures rejected. It isn't about the exact matching or the accuracy of the signature. More often than not, reasons for rejection, the biggest reason for rejection is simply forgetting to sign the envelope altogether.
Another major reminder, make sure your ballot ends up in your envelope back to the clerk's office.
You're seeing the absentee ballot for the husband coming back in the wife's envelope or vice versa. And those have to line up. The signature on the envelope has to match the registered voter's name on the envelope because that's the account they're looking for. If that doesn't line up, they're not going to look for, well, what's the spouse? So this looks like a spouse's signature. Did the spouse have an absentee ballot as well?
So what if you have a not so great signature on your license, like a smiley face or a scribble? It does happen. Well, the hope is that it's not the case, but you could get a call from the clerk's office if they have any doubt or questions about your signature. If that is you, though, and you think your signature is a problem, you can always re-register to vote on paper, the registration card. You can update your signature that way, as we talked about, but you can also find out if your absentee ballot has had an issue before Election Day. If they let you know, or if for some reason you think it didn't make it, you can check in with your county clerk's office. And let's say, for example, they do give you a call, or they do let you know there's an issue with your signature. You can still go in on Election Day. You can go in, you can talk to the clerk, and they will spoil your absentee ballot, meaning it never counted, it was never processed. And because they'll disqualify that ballot, they would still allow you to vote at the polls. So if for some reason your signature is rejected, or there's a problem with your absentee ballot, maybe in the rare case that it doesn't make it, you're not disqualified from voting. The only thing you would be disqualified from is if your absentee ballot went through, it was processed correctly, and then you showed up appearing to vote twice. So that would be an issue, but it's very rare.
You know what this tells me? It tells me that there's a pretty good verification process in place already when it comes to elections in Idaho, that they're not just going to accept anything that comes, even if it's in the wrong envelope, you just messed it up with your wives. I mean, there's a lot there that they check and double check to make sure it is legit.
Yeah, they keep such a close eye on it. And from time to time, they do catch instances of voter fraud. There was actually a sentencing out of Ada County as recently today. So it does happen. It's not one of these things where it's never happened ever. It does happen, but it's a very small amount of occurrences.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah.
If the attention paid to the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell murder case proves anything, America loves a courtroom drama. However, watching this one play out on camera won't be allowed. We ask a former judge, what goes into a decision like this? This is the part of the show where we remind you to be part of the 208 conversation. We want to hear what you have to say about our topics today, or what topics should be tomorrow. We're always looking for new stories to tell or questions to answer. So send us your thoughts to 208-321-5614. Just make sure to include your name and the hashtag the 208. All right, if you're old enough to remember the O.J. Simpson trial, you probably understand what can happen when judges allow cameras into a high-profile court case. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Well, 3 weeks ago, District Judge Stephen Boyce, the judge presiding over the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell proceedings, decided he wanted no part of the potential circus that could arise with arguably the highest-profile murder case in the country right now. Vallow and Daybell are facing multiple counts of murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of two of Lori's kids and Chad's previous wife. It's tragic and salacious at the same time. So you can understand all the live coverage of the preliminary hearings and the magazine articles, the Dateline episodes, and the documentary. In his decision on September 23rd, Judge Boyce said, while the media has been respectful and professional in its presence, and its presence has had no way disrupted proceedings, he cited an excessive and rather up-close focus on the defendant during a recent hearing back in August as a reason to no longer allow cameras for future proceedings, worried it would influence a jury pool. Cameras have been in courtrooms covering high-profile cases for decades, from newsreels of the Lindbergh baby kidnapping trial playing in thousands of movie theaters across the country in 1935, to the live coverage of the Johnny Depp-Amber Heard divorce trial last spring. The Supreme Court has held the freedom of the press and a right to a public trial as reasons to allow them, but they've left it at the discretion of the judge. So to get some understanding of why a judge might make such a decision, we sat down with a recently retired Ada County magistrate judge, that'd be Michael Oates, who, as maybe proof that not everyone has kept a close eye on the Vallow-Daybell case, given the media coverage, he wasn't even aware of the judge's decision in this matter.
To tell you how much I haven't followed it, I'm not even sure what the decision was in terms of whether.
No cameras in the courtroom.
Okay, that's news to me. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. In your years on the bench, you've had to decide whether or not to allow cameras in your courtroom. Is it a long consideration for you? Do you think long? What do you think about it?
No, I've never said no.
What do you consider? What do you think about?
The thing you think about is you're going to be on TV, and so even though you try to look your best all the time, I make sure my hair's combed and my tie's in the right spot. I mean, you're just conscious of the fact that somebody's going to be watching this later. You try to tell yourself, do not let this influence what I do today, but you're aware of the fact that more people are watching today's proceeding than a typical run-of-the-mill day when the only people interested are the parties.
Legally, what do you think about?
You think about, is this going to allow the defendant a fair trial? And everybody a fair trial. The state's entitled to a fair trial too. And so if there's any potential issue for the alleged victims in a case, for the jurors, obviously, the rules don't allow the jurors' faces to be on TV anyway. If there's some reason why the fairness might be jeopardized, then you got to think about that.
In his decision to not allow cameras in the courtroom, Judge Stephen Boyce said to continue visual coverage of this case poses a great risk to the fair administration of justice. And the court is further concerned that at trial, the added and unnecessary pressure witnesses and counsel will be subject to, knowing their every expression, utterance, and appearance will be captured and circulated without their control in perpetuity, is unwarranted and will likely interfere with the fair administration of justice in this case.
That kind of goes back to, and again, make it clear, I'm not commenting on the judge's decision in this, but that goes back to what I was saying before about, I have to honestly say, am I able to bring my A game as a judge, knowing that every time I, scratch my head, it's going to be on TV. That also applies to witnesses and the lawyers involved too. If you get the sense from whatever source that that people are so aware of what their words are going to be broadcast that it affects their ability to give testimony the way you expect it, sure, that'd be a consideration.
You're one that would lean to always allowing a camera in the courtroom.
The default would be to allow it, yeah.
The benefits of that being?
Informing the public, letting the public know what happens in court, I think is a healthy thing. I think the more attention, the better on the processes of the court system, because I think it helps debunk some myths about how we do our business. Because and I'll give you a quick example, is that most people I talk to who are jury, and I did hundreds and hundreds of jury trials, and you talk to the jurors afterwards, and almost all of them came away really glad they did it. And I think most of them took a more positive view of how the system works away than they came in with. I think you folks being in a courtroom can do the same thing.
The flip side of that is it could be a detriment.
I don't know that it could be a detriment to unless the whole proceeding, and how do you regulate this, unless the whole proceeding turns into a TV show. If that happens, obviously that's not good. And that could have a negative effect on the public's perception of the trial. I don't think it's out of line this many years later to say that the O.J. Simpson trial certainly didn't do a lot for the perception of the judiciary and how things are handled. And some would say it was because people were playing to the cameras.
Judge Oates also noted it's difficult to determine who is the press these days. It used to be just TV stations, radio, newspapers, magazines. But with online bloggers, self-proclaimed citizen journalists, well, there's just some question of accountability when it comes to those following the rules or taking courtroom proceedings out of context. Disallowing cameras kind of reins that in as well. According to Judge Oates, there is no appeal to a trial judge's decision on this matter.
Beautiful capture of those fall leaves there. Meanwhile, we're in fall, but we're still seeing very summer-like temperatures. In some spots we're seeing close to 80 degrees, including Boise, which is at 76 degrees right now. 80 degrees in Ontario, and it's warmer towards the western portion of the state at the moment. We are also seeing some 70-degree temperatures towards the Magic Valley area, and 73 degrees in the Twin Falls area. And some of those warm temperatures are going to be sticking around. We are expecting those to continue, which is abnormal for this time of year. So if we look at what our average temperature would be for the high, it would be 67. So running just about 10 degrees above average for our high temperature. Our low temperature is a little bit closer to what would be on average for this time of year for Boise. However, we're not talking about record-breaking temperatures, because the record for this date would be 88 degrees. And we are getting a little bit of a dry start to the month. We have no observed precipitation so far, when we should have seen about 1/3 of an inch so far this month. And last October was quite wet, so we're off to a bit of a drier start. We're also seeing some more of those smoky conditions today. You can see a little bit of haze there in the Boise area. McCall has a prescribed fire that's burning in the area. Sun Valley looks to be a bit clear, and then Stanley looks like to have some clouds in the area. And we do expect a little bit of changes on the way, but right now still warm. And those changes are going to be at the very end of a 10-day outlook, towards the very end. So if we look at what is ahead for us, you can see 70 degrees, staying really all in the 70s to high 70s for much of the week, the next week ahead. But then if I move out of the way, you can see that's where we start to get the drop off. And thankfully, it's not a huge drop off, but where we could easily see a drop of 20 degrees this time of year, but it does take us into the 60s.
You know, several of you chimed in about the Social Security benefits increasing 8.7% to keep up with inflation. But as you all know, that's got to come from somewhere. And several of you have made this point, including Diane, who said, yes, the extra Social Security money is nice. However, there will probably be an increase in the Medicare's premium. Also, the difference then will be the actual increase in Social Security payments. So there's going to be, like, as I said, a balancing there. And we're going to look into that a little bit further to see what that looks like when it comes to Medicare and Medicaid and all that kind of stuff, and your Social Security. Social Security would be solvent forever if our federal elected officials would repay what they have borrowed to put in the federal budget, says Keith from Meridian. But basically what they do is they treat it like a bank, where you put your money into a bank. The bank can use that to loan to other people as it sees, and then they'll pay it back. And that's how you get your money back should you withdraw it. That's kind of how the government works. But yes, that money is just kind of there, out and about everywhere, not quite just sitting in a bank account right now. So I'm getting older. My signature may be more feeble. Does that mean it does not count my vote? Not necessarily. Like I said, they take those classes to kind of verify, and there are little sections of your signature that are, well, pretty identifiable. And so that's how they look to see if yours matches. And chances are there's a good chunk of your old signature that matches your new signature. I truly believe the judge made the correct decision for all parties in the Vallow trial. No cameras in the courtroom is fair to all. Kathy seems to agree that the public does have a need to know, but we all will at the end of the day. The Simpson trial turned it into a zoo because of the cameras. We won't know until next year, so we'll see what happens with that trial.